This meeting is called to order. This is the October 8th meeting of the Board of Selectmen. We'll get right into our agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the bills, payrolls, and warrants?
So moved.
Second.
A motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? So voted. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes of the September 24th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, so voted. Okay, we have several announcements this evening. The first one is, the town is going to be having a hazardous waste event, open to Shrewsbury residents only on Saturday, October 26th, from 9 to noon at the Oak Middle School. This is really for paints and chemicals and cleaners and stuff like that. We have a brochure that's out in the lobby, but it's also available. You can see it on the website. So we haven't had one of these for a while. There is a fee, but if you got a lot of stuff, I think it's worth it. Latex paint won't be collected at this event, but just about everything else will. So it is on the website, and there are pamphlets in the town hall lobby. Also, John, the Civil War, where'd you go? Civil War Monument is the 26th?
Yes, it is, October 26th.
Oh, all right. For some reason, I was thinking it was the 15th. So there's a rededication of the Civil War Monument in the town center at 9 o'clock on Saturday the 26th. Next week, Monday is Columbus Day, so the town offices are closed. Trash will not be picked up, and so all trash will be delayed a day, as usual on a holiday. Yard waste pickup is going to begin next week on Tuesday, the 15th, and that'll run through, during the week, the entire week, through the 19th, and it's going to run 2 or 3 more times after that. Let's see, what else? People should have gotten notices by now if they're in an area where their pickup route is going to change, the day is going to change. There were 4 or 5 areas. That change is going to start on October 21st. If you're not sure if you're on the route, route that's changing, you can check the town website. I believe there's a list in the lobby of the places. You can call the manager's office, the DPW, but the notices are being hand-delivered 3 times? Mm-hmm. So you should be getting something on it. But if you have any questions, certainly contact us. And then the final thing is we're having a special town meeting on Monday, October 21st at 7 p.m. at the Oak Middle School. Mr. Miska, do you have anything this evening?
Yes, a couple items. We'll have a larger discussion on the town's water system coming up during the meeting, but water main replacement is wrapping up on Lake Street, and we'll be moving over to Main Street and getting underway with that project from the center of town down to south. I did want to update the board that we have awarded an owner's project manager contract to Construction Monitoring Services out of Marlboro. Given this will be for the municipal campus and police station project. We selected them given their similar experience with multiple buildings within a single project, and specifically their work on police stations. With regards to the Beale Elementary School, all demolition work is now completed on site. All the buildings are gone, and foundation work, framing is already started, and rebar will begin to be installed tomorrow for the foundations. And I have signed off on the second contract amendment for the construction manager. This is not a change order, it's an amendment through the master contract that we have with them, and this work includes the second early bid package with all concrete work and steel work. It's about $8.7 million of the total construction cost. And the good news is for those 2 items specifically, we're under the original estimated budget by $813,640. So continue to be in a good financial position and in a good position with relations to the schedule and how it's all been laid out. So that's all I have.
Do you have anything on how the road construction's coming on Lake Street, Mr. Kane or Mr. Miska?
Right on schedule. Hopefully by Thanksgiving, you'll be able to come up to, come off Route 9 and look through. It'll remain closed. But
Yeah.
you'll be able to see the change in elevation right through.
Okay. Great. Okay, I neglected to ask if anybody else had any announcements. Anybody else? No? Okay, then we'll move on to our next order of business. We have a meeting this evening with Jeff Howland, DPW Director, Dan Rowley, our Water and Sewer Superintendent, and representatives from Tater and Howard to review our water quality improvement initiative. So if you folks would like to come forward. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Howland, why don't you introduce everybody?
So Jeff Allen, DPW Director. To my right is our newly appointed Water and Sewer Superintendent, Dan Rowley, who comes back to the town after about a 5-year hiatus, where he decided to try a different municipality and realized that Shrewsbury is a much better place. To my left is Paul Howard and Justine Carroll from Tater and Howard, who will be giving the presentation. But before I start, one clarification, that the water main job is actually gonna start at School Street and go from School Street to the center of town.
It's going up the hill?
It's going up the hill, so they wanna start up the bottom of the hill and work their way all the way up. So the only spot they won't do is the section in front of Francis, which we did last year.
Why would you do that way?
They wanna work uphill.
Why is that?
It's so they can take the way Hallich construction works, they work from the bottom up, because they actually will backfill as they go. So that, as they pick and plus, the way, the water main's gonna be on the north side of of Main Street.
Yeah.
So the way their bucket moves, it's better, and they can actually see the hole right there that's not on the opposite side. So if they work downhill, they'll be sitting and the hole will be over here versus being right in front of them.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so,
So I turn the floor over to Tater and Howard, who's
Okay.
our water consultant.
good evening.
Thank you, good evening. We're here to talk about the water quality initiatives and unidirectional flushing program.
Oh, sorry, that's me.
Just a little background about Tater and Howard. We were founded in 1992 by Don Tater and myself. We're located right over in Marlboro, 15 minutes away, so we're very accessible. 80% of our business is water-related. We do water, wastewater, and stormwater, but we're pretty much the exact opposite of most consulting firms, where 80% of their work is wastewater. We've been in business for 27 years. We have a total staff of 70, and we've been working with the town of Shrewsbury for approximately 20 years. So we have a lot of history with the town, which we are very proud of our relationship that we have with the town of Shrewsbury. I wanted to go over the water treatment plant performance. We received partial activation of the plant approximately a year ago on October 2nd. And the reason for the partial activation was that we were bringing different wells on at different times as we were trying to keep the old facility in service as we were bringing the new facility online. So as we brought new wells online, we kept getting approval from DEP. So that process lasted for a few months, and we got the final full approval from Mass DEP on March 27th of this year. We are treating manganese to below detectable levels, which the plant is running very well, exceeds expectations, actually. And the fact that we are backwashing with less frequency, therefore having less waste, so that the plant is optimized and working very well. And the plant automation, this plant was very sophisticated in the automation and being able to remote monitor that, so that if an alarm condition came up, the operators could monitor that. If they were on call from home, see whether it was a critical alarm or non-critical alarm. Non-critical, they could acknowledge that alarm, but not have to come in to address anything. On a critical alarm, they would also acknowledge it, but come in to correct whatever deficiency it was. I'll turn it over to Justine to talk about flushing.
So, flushing your water distribution system by basically getting water out of the fire hydrants is one of the American Water Works Association best management practices for improving water quality throughout the distribution system. The Massachusetts guidelines for distribution systems recommend annual system-wide flushing, so that you can basically remove as much sediment and loose tuberculation that's sitting around inside of the pipes as you possibly can. If this is done on a regular basis, you can be ahead of the problem and continue to kind of keep things moving and clean as time passes. And then it also, in addition to helping water quality, by getting some of the deposits out of the pipes, it does allow for more water to flow through the pipes to help with system pressures and flows and the ability to get water throughout the entire town. So we're specifically looking at completing a unidirectional flushing plan. So obviously, this means that all the water is coming from one direction. So to accomplish this, you have to go out into the system and you have to close valves so that you can start from either the treatment plant or the water storage tank and basically continue to use clean water to flush the mains that you haven't reached yet. So it's a systematic approach where you basically shut a valve, open a hydrant, and then you open the valve, shut a different valve, and open a different hydrant to kind of keep keep flushing from clean water with clean water. The program uses the hydraulic model, so we'll go into a little bit more detail about your specific program in a little bit, but it's designed to maintain high velocities so that you can keep the water flowing and pick up the deposits. If it's just low water moving through, it's just gonna kind of sit there. You need some speed to the water to get it to pick up the deposits. And we also want to be able to maintain pressure while you're operating valves and closing valves. There could be some noticeable pressure changes throughout the town, but we're still designing the program to make sure that everybody has water for the period of time that they're out there doing the work. So this next slide is a kind of an infographic to kind of show the difference between conventional flushing and the unidirectional flushing. So conventional flushing is pretty much what you guys have been doing to date. You guys have really done a system-wide conventional plan. You've been kind of chasing the water quality concerns and being a little bit more reactive. So you're kind of doing isolated areas, and basically what happens is all of the pipes in a lot of areas are gridded like this. This is obviously a kind of a cartooned area, but the water can come from any one of those pipes to basically feed that same hydrant. So by having the water do that, you have lower velocities, and in some cases, you're really just moving the problem. Like, you're not necessarily getting it cleaned out of the hydrant. So to show a little bit the difference between with the unidirectional, this one actually is a little bit harder to see with the blue, so I'm just gonna stand up for this one. So to make it unidirectional flushing at the same grid, this valve here, and you would have these two valves over here would actually have to be manually shut in the system so that the water comes in one direction. So there's more water, more volume coming through that one pipe, so it allows you to pick up the deposits more effectively and flush it out of the hydrant. So again, this is just kind of a little bit more information about the differences between the two. Again, the unidirectional plan is more proactive. Conventional flushing typically just does to steer up and move the deposits. So by doing the unidirectional and using the valves to isolate areas, you're gonna prevent the resuspension of solids. It's gonna keep moving it down. Like, there might be some slugs going through, there'll be some temporary disturbance while the program is going, but you're gonna continue to flush clean water from your sources to the extremities. And when you're actually looking at it as a system-wide plan, if you were flushing all of the hydrants in the system at one time, doing it in the conventional method, just open up hydrants and standing there and waiting till the water clears, you're actually gonna end up using more water doing it that way, because you're really just gonna kind of just have everything kind of moving along. So it seems like it's a lot of water when they're out there doing it, but doing it the whole system, you're actually saving water in the long run. So Shrewsbury's unidirectional flushing plan, so we've kind of had to build up a few stages before we got to the point where we were creating the plan. The hydraulic model of your system, which basically is a computerized program that shows every pipe in your system and where it connects, where the tanks are, where the wells are, where the treatment plant is. And we've verified that model. We've been using that model probably for 20 years. We've done numerous studies where we've used the model to come up with the water main improvements that are necessary to improve flows to different areas of the system. So that's kind of the basis of the plan. And then the next step is we had to have all of the hydrants and valves in the system mapped. So a couple years ago, the town had a GIS mapping project that got done where the hydrants, valves, and a lot of other stuff were made into an ArcGIS mapping software. The hydrant data was good. The valve data was a little bit less reliable at the time. So we did some updates to that, more digitizing the valves. We didn't go out and GPS them, so they are kind of based on paper maps, the valve records. So we kind of have all the information that was available to put it into the map. And then we used the hydraulic model to develop the plan so that this allows us to model what happens when we shut these valves and we open the hydrant. Are we getting enough flow to get the velocities that we need for flushing? Because sometimes when you shut enough valves, you might not get enough flow. We'd have to go a different route and close different valves. And we're also making sure that we're not isolating any customers by shutting too many valves. And then we're trying to also maintain the system pressures on 20 pounds. The key is that this is developed based on the information we have. Obviously, system conditions may be not as we have them shown on a map. If something is closed that we may not know is closed because there was maintenance happening, so a valve got closed or it didn't get fully open, those problems are going to kind of express themselves when you implement this plan. Because now if you're shutting more valves, you could open a hydrant and we could think that you're getting a few hundred gallons a minute, but if no water's coming out, then something is obviously different in the system. So this is also another kind of check of your distribution system operating to kind of see where there are areas that might not be behaving as expected, that might need some improvements or some valve work. So this next page is...
We've found over the years too, no matter how good a town thinks their mapping is, we've never had a plan that we've developed without changes to it after it's gone through its first implementation.
So the Shrewsbury plan, they consist of what we've broken down to be 12 flushing zones. So they're basically smaller areas that can be completed in a shorter time frame, where you kind of isolate and then you flush and then you move on to the next zone. So there's 4 flushing zones in each one of the service areas, the 3 service areas in town. So, and then it doesn't necessarily have to be like zone 1 to zone 12. Each service area is designed to kind of act on its own because you've done so much work with the transmission from the treatment plant into the booster pump stations and into the service zones. You could do the high service area before the low service area, which right now, there's the plan in place. They have a project, I think, currently out to bid to contract services for some of this, and I think the plan is to start with the high service area because that's kind of where more of the water quality concerns right now are isolated. So we're going to kind of start there to get something done, and then, after that, keep moving forward into other areas of town. So this is basically an example of what one of the sheets looks like. So basically, I think when Jeff and Dan first saw the plan, I don't know, it's just 1 notebook, 2 notebooks, basically a big 3-ring binder that has a lot of individual sheets like this. So each one of these sheets represents one hydrant being flushed. So there's a drawing that basically tells you which valve is being opened, which valve is being closed, and which pipe is being flushed. And it also gives a lot of different parameters as to what the expected static pressure flow rate is, and it gives a duration to what the minimum flushing time is to basically to clean that pipe, because you don't want to just open it, everything's clean, but 100 feet away you could have that slug that hasn't gotten there yet. So it's basically a flushing time to make sure that water in the beginning of the pipe that's being flushed can make it to the end of the pipe to make sure we can clean it the best we can. So this is next slide basically summarizes the program. So this is gonna kind of give you an idea of the level of effort this is gonna take to implement. So as we said, there's 12 zones. This shows the number of sequences, which basically represents the number of hydrants that have to be operated. Every once in a while, you have a sequence where we have to open a second hydrant to get the velocities that we need, so it's not quite a one-to-one, but it's fairly close. The miles of main in each one of the zones, and then the valves operated. Again, this doesn't necessarily represent the number of valves in your system. Some valves are operated more than once. You have to close it and then open it and then close it again. But you know, it's gonna take a while to flush 992 hydrants. It's not something that you're gonna be able to go out and do tomorrow and have completed in a week. So the completion time on the final column basically gives a best case scenario. This is likely the time, once you've implemented this more than once, this is what it's gonna take to do, based on the flushing minimum durations of the flushing time, approximating an amount of time to open each valve and open each hydrant, and then it calculates the number of days. The key to this is it's gonna depend on how many people you have available to help operate valves. If you have to open only one valve at a time, it's gonna take longer than if you have, you know, a few people operating valves. The first time that you implement this, the flushing times are likely gonna be longer to clean the pipes out, whereas once the pipes, year after year, you're gonna see a reduction in the amount of time that it takes. But the key piece of information that's going to drastically impact this time is the actual condition of the valves. So Shrewsbury historically hasn't really had a valve exercising program, so many of these valves have likely not been operated unless there has been some type of water main break, some repair work done, or some other reason to have shut a valve. Which, it's good that you don't need to exercise a lot of your valves because the water main breaks, but it does make things a lot more difficult when you try to use them. So what happens is a lot of valves will get discovered that over time they may have been paved over during a paving project, or they could just be full of sand and debris, just road debris gets down the valve boxes, so they'll have to be vacuumed out to clean them, to get on them. The other thing is, many of these, once you operate them, you know, a lot of the pipes in the system are, many of them over 80 years old, so these valves, once you start turning them, they might get stuck, in which case then you may have to have somebody come in and actually repair the valve. So the plan is, especially for this first round, to be able to get things started. One of the things about the contract that's currently out, that's gonna have a contractor be able to come and do this work, the contractor is gonna be qualified to do the flushing implementation, to operate the valves, and they're also gonna be able to do the repair work that might be necessary while they're out there, so they can, if a valve breaks, they can fix it. Obviously, if it's not critical to what they're doing and it's something that can just get noted to come back and be fixed later, they can do that. But if something happens and a valve breaks shut, then they're gonna have to repair the valve in the field. So it gives the town the opportunity to be able to at least get started on this, to start flushing, to hopefully get, you know, some chunk of this done, you know, this fall before it gets too cold in the wintertime, and then basically pick up in the spring, and then keep going and keep repairing the hydrants and making sure things are working. So one of the keys to implementing the plan is it's very important to notify the customers, especially in the areas that are being flushed. Usually this works pretty well with message boards to kind of say, you know, flushing in this area, announcements. It doesn't necessarily need a flyer, but just kind of public, because there could be some disturbance to not just pressures as well, and as the stuff gets moved in, if they're flushing in the area and they're using the water, it could potentially pull a slug through. So as long as they know what's going on, to make sure they kind of just let it flush out. Usually once they're done in the area, there's not like there's something that's gonna be stuck in their service that'll pull through after the fact. It's gonna be more if somebody actually uses something while they're flushing. And then the other thing is to make sure that the fire department's aware of what's going on. So as we mentioned before, we're designing this to attempt to maintain, you know, a minimum pressure in the system while this is happening. That is fine for everybody having service, but anywhere that has a fire protection system that may have an alarm, if there's a pressure drop, that 20 pounds is likely a pressure that was set off the alarm. So there could be alarms going on, so as long as the fire department knows why, then they can kind of, and know in the area that's being done, may not have to have, they can send one person and not the entire, you know, 3 trucks and everything like that, but, which maybe they'll do anyway, but at least they'll have a better idea of what's going on. And then recording data is key. Obviously, we are gonna be using a lot of water, so you wanna make sure that the flow rates are recorded and the time is recorded, so you can calculate how much water that you're used, because that goes towards your, the accounting of how much water you're using year to year. And it also can help, historically, maintaining, seeing what's going on in your system. So if you're flushing in the same order, whether it's every year, every 3 years in an area, and from year to year, you see different flows and different pressures, that could indicate that either a pipe got changed, a valve got closed, and you can kind of see if you're seeing consistency. The same thing with the water quality. Is the water quality worse the second time, better? Did the pipe clear up faster or slower? So it's just an important information that you can have on your system. And again, the first time around especially, we're gonna figure out anywhere where there's discrepancies between the mapping and the field conditions, so that we can make sure we have as much up-to-date information as we can. It also maintain the list of valve and hydrant conditions. Any hydrants that end up leaking or not closed, they're gonna get repaired.
Before you go on
Yeah.
to the, because next thing we'll be getting into hex chrome, can we just
Yep.
stop for a minute? Does anybody have any questions on where we are right now?
Quick question, Kevin, every day, is there going to be a planning meeting? Will our people be out with the contractor in Tater and Howard? Or how is this gonna implement itself?
Yeah,
So, currently, the contract is to do this work at night, and we will have, because that way, when the less number of customers utilizing the water, so it'll be less impact on the residents. And then we will have members of the water department with them out on with the contractor out. As Justine said, we put it out on the street first. We were hoping to actually, by this meeting, already be starting the props. We had a bid opening on September 26th, but we received no bidders. We've modified the spec, and we have put it back out on the street for a bid opening at the end of October, hopefully to start. We've actually contacted a couple of contractors, asking them, it's out, make sure they got it. There's only 2 or 3 contractors that can do this. And so we've notified all 3.
What is so unique about it that you'd have a small pool?
There's not a lot that actually do the flushing part of it. So it's not getting a water contractor, it's getting somebody that specializes in this type of work.
If the contractors want to lay pipe, they don't want to open and close valves and hydrants.
And then there are some contractors that have more specialized equipment to operate the valves with automated programs. They'll also have a kind of the truck that the hosing might go through to help record the flows and everything. So they're just more kind of, there's a few contractors that really just do this type of work, valve maintenance, hydrant maintenance.
Specialize in this type of work, and the specialty in putting and tapping sleeves and valves, insertion valves.
One more question, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Given the desire for a steady and robust flow of water out of that, why wouldn't one use the equivalent of like a Vector truck or an old piece of fire apparatus as a way of drawing that crap out? Is that just too stupid?
Well, basically, you'd get more flow really from just opening the hydrant than you would from having like let's say a pumper truck come on.
Okay. Now, given the reality that we don't exercise our valves every month or whatever one would do,
Every 10 years.
what do you think the failure rate's gonna be?
So we're estimating as part of our estimate for this portion of the project, 20% of the valves that need to be operated will need to be replaced.
Be replaced?
Need to be replaced.
Not mechanically open inside?
Correct. That's correct.
So how does that impact your night's work? You go out there, you're getting
It
underway.
depends whether, as Justine said, it depends whether that would be critical of that valve. It's more critical if it broke in the closed position than the open position. But if it was broken in the open position, then you could schedule that for repair at a later time rather than addressing it immediately. See, the problem is the technology in valves has changed over time. Some of the older valves are what they call double disc valves. So there's a valve, as it opens, it spreads and goes into a seat. And what can happen on those is one of those seats can break away so that you actually think the valve's open when one side falls down. So the new technology is a single wedge valve, so it's just one wedge that comes in, and that can actually, the wedge is strong enough that it can push debris out as you close it, where the old valves wouldn't seat properly with the double disc, because they come out and then seat into a seat.
Thank you.
So with the ice picking that we've done already in those critical spots, I know that's a much more expensive process and it's slower, but going to this unidirectional flow as opposed to some of the places where we did it the traditional way, should it, well, presumably it'll clear out a little faster in those areas where they pushed a lot of stuff through the pipes already, right?
Correct, yes.
Which were the really bad spots.
Right, and that's why those were ice picked and done at that time, because the unidirectional program wasn't in place, and it needed to be done because we were bringing the plant online.
I know it's a little early to be talking about this, but say we go through this sequence, then we really should have a plan ongoing that we just stick with.
Yes, this is not a one-and-done type situation. This would be a unidirectional plan that, depending on the manpower, it's different in every city and town, is whether it's done yearly, bi-yearly, every 3 years, so you'd set up a program. And because it's in zones, it's more than likely that your program with 12 zones is probably gonna be, every 3 or 4 years that you do, you'd get those zones done, so that you'd be constantly moving around. And
Given right now well, we don't know exactly what's in there, but given the history and we know the issues that we run against, after we do this, say we finish it in the spring, okay, we're not gonna be able to wait 3 or 4 years. We're gonna have to come back sooner than that for a couple of years, right?
Yeah, so I
More
think,
than likely?
more than likely.
yeah, the idea as well is to at least get the first part done and get the valve, because once the valves issues are done, you're gonna be using the same valves every time you're out there. So if they're fixed once, they're gonna be hopefully fixed, and it's gonna be easier to do it each time. So the idea would be that eventually that you would have the operations staff internally, that you would just have, you would do 6 weeks of flushing every spring, and maybe do the reduced high 1 year, the low the next, and the high, and then beyond this continuous cycle of getting it done.
Right, but because this manganese issue has
Yeah.
been with us forever, to think we're gonna get this done in one first shot.
Yeah,
It's not
probably.
realistic.
It's not
I mean, it
practical.
could end up being minimal, but it still is gonna need to be clean.
Right, it's
Yeah.
just as we said when we talked about the plant, that, you've got a state-of-the-art water treatment facility that's no longer allowing manganese to get into the system, but we're still putting that clean water in 100-year-old pipes. And, now you're experiencing that. I mean, people think, okay, we put a treatment plant online, I open my tap the next day, the water's beautiful. That's not the case, because of the fact that it's the conditions within the distribution system that dictate that.
So is this gonna lead to, probably, you're gonna have to be doing a system-wide study, or actually, you're probably doing this go along, where we're gonna have to have a plan of pipe replacement, of pipe relining, or whatever, because we're gonna find that,
Which you already have that. There's a water system master plan that the town has
Right.
been following for, the first study was done in 2000, so we've been following that since 2000.
wait, I know we had it, but, when we get into it and we're finding out that some of these pipes they're really heavy,
That's another thing. A lot of times what happens when you do the water distribution system analysis and you make recommendations, they're made on increasing the hydraulic capacity of the mains. A lot of times it isn't towards water quality. We've had towns, actually Kevin was in Leicester, that they had the Cherry Valley and Rochdale Water District, where we had done a water distribution study. And for the first 8 years of the study, they went away from the study because they were having such water quality problems that they addressed those water quality problems in the distribution system rather than the hydraulic deficiencies. Because someone knows when they turn their faucet on, the water's dirty, but they don't know that they have inadequate fire protection. So the immediate response was, I'm getting all these phone calls, we have these water quality problems, so we're gonna, they put a higher priority on correcting those water quality problems over correcting the hydraulic deficiencies. Of course, you correct some of them, but you're not correcting the major ones.
Just one last question. So the way we're gonna do this now, I get ice pigging is a good option, but it's expensive and slow. But the unidirectional this is like nationally accepted best practice, right? The
Yes.
DEP recommends it. So this isn't experimental, this is tried and true.
Absolutely not.
Right.
It's been recommended for years that unidirectional ice pigging's only been really implemented over the last maybe 5 to 8 years that they came up with that. And really, it's a process that's used to address a water quality problem that's, I would say, of shorter length. It's not made to go through an entire
System-wide.
distribution system.
Right.
Just
What-
too expensive to do.
What, it can be used, basically, after this program is completed, you may have the areas where, look, you know, we had this hydrant open, we were getting the flows we thought we were getting, but the water was still coming out dirty after, you know, a long period of time. Or maybe we weren't getting the flows because the pipe is in such bad condition that the water's just not, the volume's not there. Then that would likely be flagged as a potential area, the ice pigging would be more effective there. So basically, kind of to follow it along, if you can isolate, you know, a very smaller amount of hot spots to do something a little bit more drastic, whether it's ice pigging or whether it's pipe replacement. At that point, you're gonna have to kind of you know, what's the age of the pipe, what's in the area. Replacing the pipe might be a better option than ice pigging. But that's, the data that comes out of this may be able to be used, and it may warrant updating some of the improvements in the master plan.
And it may require going back out and testing some of the mains and actually doing what they call looking at the C value of the main to see whether, you know, a main over time, say a brand-new pipe would be a C of 120, but, you know, we've seen Cs as low as in the 20s and 30s, and those pipes are so heavily tuberculated that ice pigging really wouldn't do anything for you. That would be, you'd be looking at either cleaning and lining if you thought it was an asset group that was, had more useful life and you could clean and line it and get it back to its original condition, or it would be a recommendation to replace that.
Yes,
I have a couple of questions. So you're mentioning that the bid goes back out at the end of October.
No, the bid opening, so it's out on the street tomorrow,
Okay.
and the bid opening is the end of October.
So are we gonna run into cold weather and not really be able to do much?
We are
This-
hoping, ideally, we're hoping to finish 2 or 3 of the zones before it gets too cold. Now, hopefully, we have a very mild winter, and we can continue, but we're assuming December 1st probably will be about the cutoff. So we're hoping that we can get, in this case, it's zone, I think it's 4, 5, and 6, which is the high zone.
What part of town are those?
It's the Wachusett, that side of town. So what we did is, over the last couple of years, we've actually plotted where we've received all the complaints, at least the ones that have come to the office. And there's a cluster in the high. That seems to be the majority of not saying there's other issues other places, but the majority of the complaints are in the high zone. So that's why we picked zones 4, 5, and 6, which I believe is the high, first.
When you say high zone, you mean high as in
The high pressure.
height?
Right.
Where
Well,
like
that's
the
the-
higher places in town where the water has to, what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, the distribution system is broken down into 3 distinct zones. One's called the low-pressure zone, that's encompasses where the treatment facility is, and then there's a reduced high-pressure zone, and that's fed from the Oak Street pump station, and that was developed back in the early 2000s. And then there's the high service area, and those are fed from Masonic tanks. So you have the low, then we have booster stations that pump into the reduced high, and then other booster stations that pump into the high-pressure zones. Each one has their own tanks that service that zone. So if you've looked at it, say, like, don't use these elevations, but say, the low pressure has, the tank overflows at 400 feet. the reduced high may be at 550 feet, and the high pressure may be at 650 feet, just to give you some. So what would happen is if we only used and pumped up to the tanks in the high service area, and the whole system was run off that grade line, we would have way too much pressure in what we call the low-pressure system now. So it's to keep the pressures within that zone in workable, safe zones so that we're not seeing too low of a pressure or too high of a pressure.
Okay. Just a couple more. So after you clean a zone, how long would it be before residents notice that their water had less sediment or less discoloration? Like, is it immediate? Does it take
It should be
time?
immediate.
Yeah, I mean, there could still be some just depending on how bad things are with what has been going on, like their hot water, the tank itself could have deposits in it
So
that
it has to
isn't,
clear out of your house, basically, also?
yeah. I mean, usually, if it's really bad, you may have been directed at some point to try to empty the water heater and refill. I don't know what, who's, but the cold water will likely clean up faster. The hot water, you might still see some residual effects, just if there is anything kind of still remaining in the tank that does need to kind of flush out. But it will improve, because now you have clean water coming in, so once the water is used in the house, you should see the cleanup.
But it
It's
should
not-
be
it's not
normal
gonna be
maintenance of it,
weeks.
should be normal maintenance with hot water heaters that, there are drains on the bottom of the hot water heaters. And you should drain off a few gallons of water on a regular basis in that. And plus, what would be part of this, it would be, don't go do a load of laundry as your first thing you do when we've flushed it the night before, is run a sink that's, maybe the main sink, run it for a few minutes, and then that should be enough to flush out the cold water portion of it, and then go on and do your normal, however you would use water normally.
So even people who don't experience the discoloration or the sediment may see it when we do this program?
Absolutely, for that first draw that comes off the
Now,
the
something
main.
like this, you're talking about this valve exercising. Do we now need a plan to exercise the valves regularly?
So this is going to take care of a lot of the valves,
But we can't leave them
basically.
sitting there for like another 20 years, right?
Right, so ideally, you're gonna keep doing this program, year after year, so those same valves are gonna get exercised. What we have done and what we can do using GIS is separately, we can say, okay, these are all the valves that were exercised, and the hydrants that are exercised as part of this. These are your valves that are remaining that haven't been looked at, that, during slower times, that you could go out and maybe tackle, a street, okay, let me get these in this neighborhood just to check them. But having a hydrant and valve maintenance program is obviously beneficial. I mean, the hydrants, you wanna make sure those are working for, first responders. If anything does happen, they wanna know which hydrants are usable and workable. Those are a little bit easier to test, than the valves. The valves usually require somebody being in the middle of the street with a truck, whereas the hydrants, you're on the side of the road. Those are easier to kind of have a valve and hydrant exercising program. It also impacts your fire insurance rating. One of the questions when they come out and do their inspections is, do you have a hydrant maintenance program? Do you have a valve maintenance program? And that impacts your scoring. So yeah, it is beneficial to then kind of build on the valves and the hydrants that you're repairing and fixing here, and kind of over time. And it would also help in a water main failure. It's definitely the water department. The worst thing that happens is if there is a main break and you're out there and you can't get on the valves, and now you just have to keep going, and before you know it, a quarter of the town is closed because you can't shut down the valves to isolate the main break. So there are a lot of benefits to having one in place, kind of piggybacking on top of this.
As we said, that the program is probably gonna be implemented to go through the entire system every 3 or 4 years, so you'd no longer get that 10 or 20 years that the valves would be operated. They'd be operated because you're gonna be implementing a unidirectional flushing plan as part of your ongoing system maintenance. The most it's gonna go is how often you do that flushing, so probably every 3 or 4 years.
So that's it for conventional flushing then? We don't do that anymore? We always do unidirectional?
You may, I mean, the conventional may be done like a quick spot, we had a water main break in this area. Because of that, they've experienced some water quality problems that they not normally would see. Then you might look at the unidirectional and see, well, I can close a couple valves here and not do a complete unidirectional, but something better than the conventional flushing to clear up that area. What you don't want to do is keep moving that, and the conventional with, if you don't, it just keeps moving it along. You think you've flushed this area, but you've just moved it into another area, then it comes back to this area, and then you go out and do it again because you're not getting that velocity that's taking that sediment and getting it out of the mains.
And then the exceptions to that would be sometimes there are different types of water quality happening on pipes that aren't looped. So basically a side street that doesn't go through to another street, there could already be a pipe that water is only coming from one direction. So you wouldn't necessarily have to close any valves if you had an isolated problem over there. You would just open the hydrant and it's already unidirectional by that.
A dead end
It's a
line.
dead end line, yeah. So if you ever had to go flush, if there was an isolated incidence of, a dirty water complaint there, you would just go out and do
Funny
that.
things happen sometimes where you've put a new main on a street, you didn't change the services over, so you've kept the old main in service. Now, there's no longer really a lot of flow going through that old main, it's only servicing the people that are drawing off it, so that water quality can become a lot different than it was before that new main went in. So that's why we try to tell our clients, when you put a new main in, don't just put a transmission main and tie all the new services over. Sometimes it's really baffling that you just can't figure out. I mean, there may be a dip in the main and sediment collects there. One person has a service there that they get a problem, none of their neighbors have a problem, or 3 houses may have it, the next 10 don't. So sometimes it's really baffling but a lot of times it's either how the main is connected, where their service tap is connected off that main. So there are a lot of variables that sometimes you scratch your head and say, we don't understand what's happening. How is this one house getting these problems when none of their neighbors are?
Thank you.
That's interesting you say that, because people on a long street, just somebody halfway down the road say, I'm getting dirty water, and ask the neighbors on both sides or further up the road, and they're not getting any, so it could be that.
It could be that the neighbors are tapped on the top of the pipe and
Yeah.
they happen to be tapped on the bottom of the pipe.
Or if the pipe
Or if that's a low section within the main because they dip down there to go under a drain line or a sewer line.
I had just one last question, and it's about the process as we move through. I was reading how one of the water associations said you move through the process and you need to stay on well, you can run behind, but you don't want to run ahead because you need to notify people. If you tell people that there's only going to be whatever area is going to be done over time, you really can't jump ahead because they're not going to know it's going to happen, and they could be in for a surprise the next morning, right, or the end of the day. So even if you get done earlier in the night than you think you're going to, you can't necessarily go and start someplace new, right?
Correct.
Yeah, but typically you would notify enough that would get you through that you would.
Right.
You'd say, we're doing this whole area, you might not get to that area.
Right.
That day, but again, you always want that clean water behind you.
Yeah, but if you're not, if you're lucky and you actually run ahead of schedule, you can only jump so far ahead.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions on this before?
Thank you.
Hexcom.
I'm gonna turn it back over to Paul, so he can do some of the more of the talking.
Well, as we know, between 2017 and 19, the home farm wells have shown relatively consistent levels of hexavalpromium. 6.1's about 10 parts per billion, 6.3, 10, 6.4 between 10 and 15, 6.2 and 6.5 are below the detection limits. And the finished water has run consistently between 2 and 4. And that has been managed by the water department, that they've began a well management program where the wells that have exhibited the higher concentrations of hexavalent chromium have been used to a lesser degree to try to keep the finished water levels at those low levels between 2 and 4. So we've implemented a plan of we're looking at some replacement well work that we're doing, and And that's to look at how we can manage those sources and what wells we can pump and give us flexibility in pumping those wells. But the idea is to not just totally not pump a well and then move, if you looked at the home farm site, 6.1, 6.3, and 6.4 are up near the front of the site, where 6.4 and 6.2 and 6.5 are in the rear of the site. So we know that the plumes going to those are very narrow from some of the work that's been done to date. So the idea is to not totally not use those wells and then draw that plume over to the other wells that aren't exhibiting that now. So there's there's some give and play and some trial by error type of things that we're doing to try to maintain those levels low, yet still utilize the sources and supply the customers with the amount of water that we need. So our original pilot plan was to do a two-stage biological treatment system. That was installed within the building of the old home farm water treatment facility. The pilot testing wells were installed at the property line. Those exhibited some elevated levels of hexavalent chromium, up to 90 parts, and that we had deep and shallow wells. There were about 40 parts per billion in the shallow wells.
Just let me interrupt you so people don't think we're sucking that into our wells right now. Those were the test wells, those weren't.
Those were not the
wells that
production
were part
wells,
of
no,
the
they were
system.
test wells that we knew
Right,
where the
okay.
plume was coming from, that it had exhibited much higher levels on
Okay. Just want to make sure people realize it's not.
on an adjacent property. We wanted to see what it was at the property line. But as the pilot, it took a while to negotiate with DEP, what we call a pilot test proposal, where we're telling them how we're going to conduct the pilot test, what water quality sampling we're doing, how we're going to evaluate the treatment system. So while all that was going on, we put pumps in those test wells that we installed at the property line. And while we started the initial part of the pilot test, there was no hexavalent chromium in those things, so it went away, and we pumped some of the waste, we switched it and looked at the higher wells, the lower wells. So what happened was that there wasn't sufficient hexavalent chromium in the water to evaluate the treatment system. So we ran out of time, because the pilot unit itself is worth several $100,000. It has to be, we had it inside the treatment facility for safety purposes and to protect it. The building was being demolished as part of the construction of the new treatment facility, so we sort of ran out of time. The hexavalent chromium wasn't there. We no longer had the housing for the pilot unit, so the pilot was discontinued. So now that we're going to implement the pilot program again, we decided that we should look at a alternate technology, so that we'd have different options for looking at the treatment. So we added a second treatment option. The pilot testing now is not going to be supplied from those wells. They're going to be supplied from the actual production wells, and then we have the ability to spike it with hexavalent chromium so that we can make the concentration anything we want it to be, so that we can evaluate the processes through a range of concentrations of hexavalent chromium. So right now, we've gone through that. We're looking at how we can store that equipment, and then the different discharge locations, because we put a new sewer pump station in at the site as part of the new treatment facility, so that depending upon where we put the pilot units, we still have to get some piping over to get it into that, because that discharges to the Blackstone treatment facility.
say, oh, up.
So the plan is to begin the piloting again in the spring. We're putting together the pilot test proposal for the alternate technology now. We still have approval of the original biological technology from the original submittal, but we'll be putting that back in because we're using some of the data that was developed when we did that piloting to sort of reduce, which we're trying to reduce the amount of sampling that's required as part of the pilot study, because it's quite substantial. Just the water quality sampling portion of it's over $70,000. So we expect the piloting to take 3 to 4 months. The results will be late in summer of 2020 with the pilot test report being submitted to DEP in the fall of 2020. And then from that, we'll have recommendations of what we think the best process is, how that process should be implemented if you are going forward with treatment of the hexavalent chromium.
Okay. Question?
Just two quick questions. For both of the items, what's the anticipated budget
To do the pilot testing?
of this one and then of your directional
Oh.
flow on the first one?
I don't know what you guys had estimated for the unidirectional flushing. Again, I mean, if you were doing it in-house, then it's just kind of staffing. I don't know what, just with because I don't know how many valve,
I understand.
so I'm not quite sure what the budget was on that one.
The unidirectional budget, again, assuming that we have to replace 20% of the valves, which is the largest cost. We estimated around 580,000 to do the entire town.
With phase one, any sense of what the ongoing cost
It would be
annually?
reduced each year because we don't have to replace the valves. If I don't
So
remember
I
exactly
think the intent is that our water department personnel will follow these contractors and be trained in how to do it, and that eventually that process will become in-house and you'll be doing it with in-house forces.
And how about the budget estimate for the second portion?
I believe last year was appropriated $350,000 for the piloting. We actually just sent a contract today, I think that was $230,000.
And that's really just the piloting and engineering. That doesn't include, there's some, equipment, piping, and we actually have to, the challenge this time around is the unit is very large. We can't get it in the door of the well building that's there, so we have to put it basically outside in a containment area and then cover it so that it's weatherproof. The easiest solution to do that is kind of like an oversized carport, which is one of the reasons why April is the idea to start in April, because then we don't have to worry about any of the freezing, because there's gonna be piping running from the well 6163 building to the unit, and then to get the other one to the sewer discharge. So if we just don't have to deal with any water freezing, it would just, and then it allows us time to schedule the pilot testing. So there will be, the additional costs have to do with some of the,
We feel that it's probably gonna come in 60 or 70,000 below that budget of 350, even when you look at those peripheral costs.
and especially if we can get the laboratory testing requirements down. I mean, obviously, we have to test hexavalent chromium throughout the duration of the pilot, which that alone, because you have to send those samples out, I think the lab's in Indiana, that does the certified testing for that. But DEP basically had, the testing protocol has them sending lab samples 2 times a week for basically any other possible thing you can imagine, like iron, manganese, pH, stuff that we could measure with field testing equipment, and possibly only maybe have to do once a week sampling instead of 2, because it's not something that we think is going to be impacted by the treatment technology itself. That's stuff that you're handling with the main part of the plant. This pilot is just really to address hexavalent chromium, but I think DEP wants to make sure it's not, with it being a biological treatment process, to make sure there's not any other kind of impacts to the water quality. But it was a very intensive sampling matrix plan for the process.
Thank you.
Because the original thought was that the treatment may go to the individual wells, and now the thinking is more that it may be in addition to the treatment facility that's down there, so that instead of treating just an individual well at maybe 1 million or 2 million gallons a day, that, eventually it could be another 7 MGD facility that would supplement the treatment facility that's there now.
Thank you.
So, and going back to the unidirectional flushing, if we did it in-house, we don't have the equipment to do that, do we? Do we need special equipment?
The equipment that we do not have is if we find a valve that doesn't work. We always have to sub out now when we have an issue. If we have a water main break now and we find valves that we can't open, we have to get a company to come in to exercise those valves. We had a problem we were trying to isolate Julio Drive a couple of weeks ago and we couldn't do it. So we had to get a company to come in to actually turn the valves because we physically couldn't do it.
Do you have a hydraulic valve operator?
No.
We would probably recommend that.
Oh, we have one.
Oh,
We
you
don't
do
have one on staff, no, but there's a company in West Boylston that we use currently.
If we don't need any of those,
But would you think that might be something, Jeff, that you'd eventually
We could.
purchase and have in-house? And those run, I think, in the $70,000 range, and it does an amazing.
but we
lot
don't
of
need
things.
anything else, like to measure the pressure, the flows, we don't need
We
any.
will need to do that, because I
I
don't.
mean, is there
believe we-
special, is it special equipment, like expensive, or?
No, for the flows and pressures, it's hundreds of dollars for that.
Pressures, you just get a gauge,
Oh, all right.
and then we do with the pitot. With the
Or,
pitot.
yeah, or usually you would probably have some type of diffuser, or they have them in.
Diffuser will measure it right there.
basically,
So you're just reading off a gauge on the diffuser.
Yeah, and it dissipates the flow, so it's not all just coming right outside the hydrant. They have ones that they're called a hose monster, that it's, 20 feet of fire hose, and then it basically, you put it in the street and it diverts the flow on the ground level in both directions, and yeah, those are only $700-800.
That's good.
So, yes, and sometimes they may have diffusers in-house and just need to update them, so those are minimal costs.
Anybody else have any questions, Mr.?
I'll just wrap up whatever. I don't know if anyone knows.
Anybody else?
No, thank you.
So, I mean, it just, we know it's been a frustrating process through the community, and we've been trying to meet with Tate and Howard more frequently and have a little more planning efforts as we move forward with this, implementing this plan that they've developed, specifically for our system. Later on in the meeting tonight, we'll talk about some additional funding that we're requesting through this upcoming town meeting to be able to handle, anything else that may come up and the cost of this unidirectional hydrant or unidirectional flushing program. So we've been behind the scenes a little bit towards the end of this summer and putting a plan in place, and we're gonna do as much as we can before the weather breaks this year. And being able to understand where we've had the most hits or hot spots within the system, all mapped out, allows us to be really strategic with the limited amount of time we have left. And we're gonna stay after it until it's clean and then keep doing it. I mean, and that's the important part, year after year, or whatever cycle we need to get in, once we get it clean, we'll keep it clean.
Okay. Anything else? Could you stay for just one second?
Sure.
While you're here, there's something in the correspondence that we, on 17, there's a letter from Mr. DeTaglia that people that, I have heard other people in the neighborhood complaining about the new intersection at Lake and Spruce.
Yep.
Could you just explain that that's the way an intersection's supposed to be built?
Yeah, so when we knew that Lake Street was gonna be reconstructed, we do have a crash cluster at that intersection of Spruce and Edgewood in the past. So one of the things to correct the problem, and we looked at some of the accident data, we were getting a lot of vehicles that were exiting Edgewood and then just not stopping, or we were getting angle crashes. So in order to do that, we brought it more into a true intersection than it is now, than it used to be. Used to be much wider, wide open. You could go from Edgewood to Spruce without realizing that this car is coming from Lake, also trying to get onto Spruce or Edgewood. So with that, we made it more of a true intersection. We have gotten a lot of feedback on that intersection, both positive and negative, and I would say right now it's probably 50-50.
Would it make any sense to people got used to it to put some kind of posts or, I can't think of it, something
Markers?
reflect, yeah, markers on the edge, so until people get used to it, so,
Was it last Tuesday, I think it was, the car went straight, went right over the,
yeah.
went down the sidewalk. Nick is looking into it, Highway Division Manager is looking at putting some we were just talking, maybe we can put shrubbery, but, that would, actually not be good because of sight distance
Right.
looking around the corner. But we are looking at it, and once the line striping goes in, then that will make it obvious, because you'll be able to see the lines more than you can, right now, there's no lines. So it makes it look worse, everything kind of blends together. But once the lines go in, it'll make it a lot easier and visual.
Yeah, people are used to making that wide
Correct.
arc.
So we have talked to the bus company, and the buses don't have any issues whatsoever with that.
Okay.
I had a
Great.
Question on that too. I had brought that up, also putting in some sort of reflectors, but I was mostly thinking once it snows and people aren't, when they can't see it quite as clearly, I don't know if they should be temporary until people get used to it, or if they should stay up through the winter too, because I know we have a lot of plow drivers that maybe are contractors and they might not quite know that it changed, and then we'll lose that
I was gonna say the same thing.
island.
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. So Dan, you happy you're here for all this?
Very happy, yeah. Get started on these initiatives and really, work on bringing the water sewer division, up to, an excellent standard.
Well, you're gonna be really busy for a while, so. Thank you for coming in, thank you for the presentation, it was very complete,
Yeah,
good.
thanks so
I appreciate all the work and the help you gave us, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, take care. Okay,
Leave the chairs, Jeff. Leave the chairs, yeah.
where is? Oh, he's not, okay, then I don't need to worry about him. Okay, our next meeting is, meeting with the Historic District Commission to discuss, a few things, the the Civil War, commemoration, doing some cleaning of, some of the monuments and signage, so.
This is up and down, and if I want to go back up, right there. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Campbell, good evening. But when you start, before
For
you
the
start,
record,
you introduce everybody?
for the record, my name is John Campbell, Chairman of the Shrewsbury Historic District Commission, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to update the board on some of the activities of our commission. I'd like to introduce the people here. We have Melanie Petrucci, Don Hutchins, Nancy Burnett, Chris Gustafson, and then we have two guests, Marsha and Jim Smith, who are real advocates for the Artemis Ward House, as well as the Artemis Ward Gates and the Artemis Ward Monument in the old section of the cemetery. So they've helped us a lot and given us a lot of feedback. And again, I just want you to know that we have a very engaged and dedicated and competent board that I've had the pleasure of working with for the past 5.5 years. I think they all love and have a deep appreciation for Shrewsbury history and maintaining that history. Chris Gustafson mentioned tonight, and I thought about it, every property in the historic district has had some impact in the past 5 years plus. The new library, the Sumner House, the church, all of the residences, the cemetery itself, and the town common. We've impacted in some measure every single one of those. And a good reason that without exception, the owners of the properties are good stewards of their properties. They appreciate the character and the importance of this historic district. So we want to talk about 3 projects tonight, and the first is our Civil War monument. 150 years ago, 1869, it was dedicated. 29 Shrewsbury men lost their life during the Civil War. We had a population of about 1,500. If it had been the population we have today, it would be 700. You know, in contrast, in the past 70 years, we lost one Shrewsbury resident in the Korean War, one Shrewsbury resident in the war in Vietnam, Charles Murphy, and one Shrewsbury resident in the global war on terror, Brian Moquin. So the Civil War had a huge impact on the town of Shrewsbury. And we're doing this because of the 29 names, and we've actually, through Don Hutchins' efforts and Mike Perna's efforts, we may have actually added a couple of names to this. But there's 29 Shrewsbury names on that list. And,
They're actually on the monument itself.
yeah, on the monument itself. So again, the largest writing you see on that monument is erected 1869. So that's the reason we're doing this, to honor the 29 men. We have a ceremony coming up on October 26th, and we plan to have the Sons of the Union veterans do their Grand Army of the Republic rededication ceremony. We plan to have the Star Spangled Banner done on the church bell tower. It's all over the center of town, you hear it. We have the Lieutenant Governor and a state representative speaking. We have approximately 30 Civil War reenactors. So we really have a nice ceremony, and again, it's to honor the 29 Shrewsbury men who gave their life. This is an interesting picture here. This is 100 years ago. This is 1819. And the monument was there at that time. And about 50 years ago, in 1919, thank you. This is in the late 60s, so this is about 50 years ago. Anyways, that's our plans, October 26th at 10 a.m. to have a rededication ceremony for the Civil War monument in the front of the town common to honor the 29 Shrewsbury residents who gave their life. Our second project.
Before, we are having coffee and donuts.
Yes.
So please come early, before 10 o'clock.
Yes. Our second project is the Ward Monument and Ward Gates in the old section, the cemetery. As you can see, the Ward Monument had decades of mold, bird droppings, debris, dirt, and we want to clean that. And again, this is the first phase. The first phase is to clean the Ward Monument and Ward Gates and to repoint. Well, there it is now. This picture here was Friday last week. This picture was Monday yesterday. The cleaning was done over the weekend. So you can see, there it is before, and this is the after. So that part's been done, and we also cleaned the two gates. We need to repoint though. You can see your gate here, how the mortar is gone. So we're working with Angela Snow and Kevin Esposito, and we plan to have that done during the next several weeks. Phase two of this, working with Jim and Marcia Smith, is going to be to work on a solution to fix the signs. We haven't really come up with a solution yet, but we are going to be working on that. So
What does that mean, John? Fix the sign?
perhaps put a separate freestanding sign that they do in some monuments. Before we lose this to history entirely, and we know what's on the signs, and it's about 8 different signs, not just one. So we want to come up with a solution so this is not lost to history. Those are the 2 gates there, as you can see, and they've been cleaned as well. These are pictures from last week. And you can see each side has a sign.
Yeah.
And again, these signs are over 200 years old, so. This is the Captain Levi Pease Monument. As many of you know, he started the stagecoach and was a Revolutionary War veteran. That sign has been removed as of Saturday, and it's being cleaned. But that's in pretty bad shape. That was part of the contract. So that's the second project we have, working with Jim and Marcia Smith and the Historic District Commission to clean and preserve the Ward Gates and Ward Monument. The last project we have is Shrewsbury Historic District signs. We originally, about 3 years ago, wanted 5 signs, and we installed 3 of them. We don't have one on 140 northbound at all. You go from Grafton to Boylston, and there's no sign that indicates you're in the Shrewsbury District. There's also not a sign in front of the Artemis Ward House, which is part of the Historic District. So our plan is, through the Smiths, to ask Harvard University to pay for the sign in front of the Ward House. And by the way, also on Part 2, to have them help us fund the signs at the Ward Gate and Ward Monument. We don't know for sure if they'll do it, but we think we have a reasonable chance of them doing it. So what I'm here tonight for is to ask for consideration, if possible, for one additional sign to be put up on 140 northbound at the side of the library. And that is it. Questions?
I think you said there's funding from the original allocation for the signs to be able to, is that right? That we have money that we could actually do the other sign on 140, or no?
No, we have money left to clean the Veterans Monuments from a
Okay.
town meeting warrant article that was approved. There was money left to clean veteran monuments, and because Artemis Ward.
So that's how you were able to do the other?
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't have money for the sign?
We don't have money for the sign.
So,
It's about $2,000. It's a bronze sign, specially made with the Shrewsbury seal, that has both the town, the church and the town common and the Civil War monument on it, just like the one right in back of you. So it's a specialized sign, so something would work with the town manager's office on. It's not really a capital item, but if there's some funds available over the next year or so, we'd really like to add that one sign.
and where would it go?
Fun?
Where would it go?
Oh, on Route 140 north, side of the library, just past
On
Main
the
Street.
side of the, not on the, not south of Main Street?
Right. As Chris pointed out to me, we want to have one going north, south, east, and west. We have nothing going northbound at all now. And we're going to do 5. That's what we sort of were approved on, but for budget reasons, the former town manager said, why don't we just start with 3 for now and go from there?
Okay.
So questions
That's
of the
the list.
commission?
I guess we were talking about, I guess, replicating the signs on the Howe gates, on the War gates. but
Right.
I've got it wrong. So what would you do? Make, maybe not something that expensive, but make some kind of a plaque like that and put it next to it?
Angela Snow showed me some pictures where they're doing that in some other historic areas in the Boston area, where they're making a bronze plaque of the writing that's on the monument that's illegible, and just placing it right next to the monument. So that's one alternative. We really haven't got a recommendation. Something we'll come back next spring and next summer and make a recommendation on.
So there's no way to fix it?
No, not really.
Just the
We
elements,
used
just
to,
the word, right?
Yeah.
they used to put black ink years ago. They'd actually,
Kind of read it.
it was the Ward family, I think, would actually fill in, every year they'd fill in the writing with, black ink to make it more readable, more legible.
But the elements of just wearing it.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
That'd be too bad to lose it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I think if you wouldn't mind at your next meeting, if sending us a formal vote requesting some level of funding for this purpose. I think that would be better than just a conversation in a meeting.
For the
Your sign.
For this sign?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, make a formal
Yeah, just send
request?
us a letter that you voted
Oh,
to
through an email.
request it.
Yeah, just
Okay,
so we get it in
understand.
as opposed to just a conversation.
Yes, understand, I will do that, yep.
Good.
On the 24th, October 24th, right?
October 24th, our next meeting, right?
Yeah, whenever, a
Okay.
couple weeks is gonna make a difference.
John,
Discussed
how many more plaques or monuments are there that need to be restored in town?
Well, you know, a lot of them are privately owned. The Ward Monument is kind of in the public domain after all these years now. The plaques at the library gates, we talked about at one point. I think,
They wanted to let the patina be the natural patina
Yeah.
on those particular stones. There's one for the Memorial Highway that's up there that was mentioned recently, but they chose to have the natural patina there, and then on the sides of the library that are on Main Street, they wanted those to keep the natural patina too.
Who's the "they"?
We discussed it with.
those are the library
the
trustees, I
library
think.
trustees.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, at the time. There's two ways to go. One is to clean the bronze
Yep.
plaque so it looks brand new, and another is to leave the green patina on it. I think it's a choice. But there are some, we haven't identified them all, and really, our focus is just on the historic district itself. So,
The library's in the historic district, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
yes, it is, yes.
That's great. Any other questions? No?
Thank you.
Well, thank you
Great.
very much.
Appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you for keeping it alive. I don't know why I keep calling it World War. The Civil War dedication,
That's great.
sounds like it's gonna be really nice.
Yes, it is, yes.
Thank you, thanks for coming in. Thanks for waiting all that time.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, the next order of business is to review and act on the Board of Selectmen Policy 25, Water and Sewer Partial Bill Abatements. Mr. Mizikar, do you want to lead that discussion?
Absolutely. So from your prior two meetings now, we've gone through a few more iterations of this policy to attempt to make it as clear yet broad and flexible as we possibly can in order to address the ongoing water quality issues that we'll have even as we work through the water quality initiative. So we think we have what could be considered a final policy for the board's consideration. The last iteration was just some, I think, minor tweaks to this document, but I'm happy to answer any questions on the highlights within it, if any remain.
Any questions, comments on this?
I think it looks great. I think you did a fantastic job of incorporating everything that we had mentioned. I've already had people asking me, what do they do? They had just recently gotten bills, and they were people that had pre-existing conversations with the water department, had people from the water department come out to their house and talk to them about how to, clear the sediment, and they're now looking for a way to kind of reclaim that money. So I think people are looking for this, and I think it's really a great thing that we're able to offer them a really comprehensive plan for an abatement.
Good, do you have any?
Just, this does incorporate the comments that we had before, just one possibility on 8, where as I look at it right now, again, that the decision can be appealed to the town manager, but any decision by the town manager will be final, just to make it clear.
Okay.
Sure.
Yep.
That way, there's no expectation that if the town manager, just to put it there.
Okay, good idea. No, I think it came out good. I think it addresses our issues, and as we go along, if we have to come back and revisit it, we can revisit it, but it's a good place to start. And I think it is an appropriate thing to do, given what some of the residents had to go through with this. Mr. Kane, did you have any comments on the
Nope.
water policy?
Agreed, thank you.
Okay, so, then, could I have a motion to adopt the policy with Mr. Samia's addition.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion second, any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, so voted. Okay, next order of business is to review and act on recommendations for the articles on the special town meeting. Mr. Mizikar.
Okay, I will walk the board through the motions and the actual actions of town meeting that will be requested, at least at this time. The first is the adjustment of the current year fiscal year 2020 operating budget. And this one on paper is a little hard to follow, but ultimately, I think it's a good story. So first and foremost, the total spending for fiscal year 20, the adjustments that will be made or proposed for the special town meeting are $120,169 less than the total spending when we left the annual town meeting in May. The biggest change in that is a reduction in tax or exempt taxation, which is related to bond offerings for the Beal School. So there is a reduction in the total taxation that is to be raised by $180,878, again, as in comparison to how we left the meeting in the spring. We will need to transfer in $34,323 from the water enterprise to cover their final numbers for debt service for the new treatment plant and the design thereof. There's a transfer within the Public Buildings Department of $3,400, which will be moving from expenses to salaries, which will actually save us about $1,500 by performing custodial services at the Shrewsbury Public Library on Sundays in-house versus contracted. And we'll need to transfer in $22,986 in free cash to get the budget to balance out. So I know it's a little awkward to reduce spending, but then still need to transfer funding in, but the exempt taxation can only be used for those purposes which it was authorized, which means there's a couple moving parts. There is an increase within both the fire department salaries and expenses totaling roughly $37,000 related to the funding that's required to onboard and pay the town's portion of 4 additional firefighters, which will be supplemented through a federal SAFER grant. There is a slight increase in the total interest that we'll pay on the fire station for fiscal year 2020, but ultimately over the balance of the life of that borrowing, we'll save $227,922 from the refinancing that we did in July. We're adding to the long-term interest of the water treatment plant and the water treatment plant design. The long-term debt interest for the Beal Elementary School will be reduced by $258,024. And over the life of that borrowing, we'll pay $3,947,000 less than we originally anticipated. We'll need to increase the operating support within the IT department or MIS department by $9,000 to cover the town's portion to upgrade the phone switch, which is a shared switch with Selco in the schools, with them each of them providing their prorated portion of that bill, which is a $150,000 total project cost. So those are the changes that we're proposing to the annual budget at this time.
Okay, any questions or comments?
I think it's laid out succinctly, thank you.
Okay, then do you want to vote on these as we go along?
Motion to approve. Motion to recommend.
Second.
Okay, we have motion second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Mr. Mizikar, Article 2.
Article 2 is a request of town meeting to establish a special purpose stabilization fund for the benefit of the town water system. This is the creation of account. There's no funding involved with this. It establishes a separate rainy day fund that would only benefit the water enterprise, which is the new enterprise that we established this year, and is part of the revised manner in which we are setting aside, more stably setting aside reserves for the benefit of not only for bond rating purposes, but also any future unexpected costs that may arise within each utility.
Okay. Any questions on that? No. Could I have a motion?
Motion adopt, recommend, what should we be?
Recommend.
Recommend, there we go.
Second.
Okay, motion second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So voted. Article 3,
Article 3 is the standing article that we most frequently call the fall town meeting for, which is the transfer funds from free cash that were generated from the water revenues and not expending the total amount of funding that was appropriated for the water. This will be the last year that we have to do this, as we now have the enterprise up and operating. The total funding to be transferred from free cash is $1,940,000. And that's a larger number, but we did anticipate this. The board will recall in May of 2018, we established a new water rate. That was after the annual town meeting occurred for the FY19 year, and we did not anticipate any additional revenue from that rate increase because we wanted to make sure that user trends would not impact the increase in the rate. So that generated more free cash on the revenue side than we have in past years. We plan to transfer those funds out in 3 different ways. One is our conventional transfer of $825,000 to the water system improvement account, $865,000 for water quality improvement and projects and initiatives that we heard a lot about earlier, and able to also set aside future planning dollars for in case other projects come up as we continue to have to test for more and more contamination and other materials on an annual basis. And then $250,000 to the Special Purpose Stabilization Fund, which was created, will have been proposed through Article 2.
Motion to recommend.
Second.
okay, motion second, any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Article 4,
Board members, I'll just take a second to pause here and mention that total free cash, which we are spending in several articles tonight, starting in Article 1, was certified by the Department of Revenue at $8,631,981. It does have that $1,940,000 of water revenue in it. It is the largest free cash that has ever been certified for the town, and we have a healthy base even outside of the water amount that we're pleased to see and that we've been planning for year after year. So, again, over $8.6 million in free cash. And Article 4 proposes using $35,500 of that to increase the funding for Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services through 2 initiatives, $6,200 for an outreach for elder service needs assessment, and $29,300 for the prorated cost of a salaried clinician position within that organization, spanning the time period of November 1st through June 30th, the balance of the town's fiscal year.
okay. Questions, comments? Any motion?
Motion to recommend.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Voted. Article 5,
Article 5 is a request to use $33,000 in free cash for the town manager's office to oversee and conduct a survey of buildings and structures of historical significance within the community. This figure was based upon several conversations and a written quote that I've received from historic preservation consulting firms.
Motion to recommend.
Second.
second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Article 6,
Article 6 is the appropriation of what is known as transportation network companies per ride assessment. These are funds at a rate of 10 cents per ride that the town receives through the state for Uber and Lyft and related alternative ride network companies. The total is $16,018, and that represents funds that were realized in calendar years 2017 and 2018 after this act was established. So that means 160,180 rides had originated in the town for those types of transportation means over that 24-month time period. So it will be appropriated out under the purview of the statute, which is required for alternative modes of transportation improvements.
That's a lot of dimes.
I can't believe, isn't it, though?
Yeah.
Motion to recommend.
Second.
Okay, motion second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Article 7,
Article 7 is the first of three proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw. The first is to clean up language of the zoning bylaw by removing an obsolete reference to the chair of the planning board serving on the Board of Appeals.
okay, this just cleans up what we did.
Yep.
As I mean, okay, any questions? No? You have a motion?
So,
Second.
Okay, you have a motion and a second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Article 8,
I'll just let the board know for Articles 7, 8, and 9 that the planning board has recommended adoption of them as well. Article 8 is change to the zoning bylaw to provide a clear and more comprehensive definition to the gross floor area within the zoning bylaw.
okay, any questions, comments?
motion to adopt.
Second.
Recommend.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Article 9,
Article 9 is the last zoning bylaw amendment, which adds the definition of a contractor's yard and a storage yard, where there was none in the past. It was only embedded within the use table.
Motion to recommend.
Second.
okay, we have a motion and a second, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, so voted. Article 10,
The final article for this warrant is proposes increasing the maximum fine for any violation relating to public health from its current $200 to a proposed $300.
and this just is following what the state law had changed, right?
Yeah, so it was identified to be consistent whenever, with other communities and our ability to be impactful as it relates to flavored tobacco regulations. And as we went to move into that, we saw that our general bylaws did not enable us to do that, so we need to make this change to levy that fine.
Okay, motion?
So
Motion
moved.
to recommend.
Second.
Motion and second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay, on to the next item of business. This is to review an act to authorize the chairman to sign a disclosure by non-elected municipal employee of financial interest form as required by Mass General Law, Chapter 268A, Section 19, to authorize the town manager to serve as a steering committee and board member on the West Suburban Health Group. This is just like cleanup
Yep.
language, right?
Yeah, so I
Just
can
make
give you an
sure that-
overview. So, yeah, so I sit on the West Suburban Health Group Board and Steering Committee on behalf of the town of Shrewsbury. I also receive health insurance benefits from the town of Shrewsbury. In my role as a board member on that board, I have the ability to impact the rates of the health insurance. So it could be a perceived conflict of interest of both setting the rates and paying for them. So I'm disclosing this conflict of interest and seek the board's authorization, confirming that I'm able to still serve in that capacity impartially, and my personal financial interest does not impact my decision-making. Which it doesn't. I have one plan out of about, 12 different options that town employees can take, and my interest is always total bottom line for the town.
And we had to do this, in the West Suburban Health Group, there were a lot of members who had to do that because of.
Yeah, I mean, it's very common for members to also take the insurance.
Okay, pleasure of the board.
Motion to authorize the chairman to sign.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed or voted. Item 10 is to review an act to approve the display of the Massachusetts Medal of Liberty for Technical Sergeant Joseph D. McGarry in the Richard D. Carney Municipal Office Building. This came as a request from Mr. Perna. It came to the attention of, did it come from the Veterans Retirement? I got it in here somewhere.
Veteran Service District.
Anyways, it was discovered that there is a medal for this gentleman. He was killed in action in 1943. He was an only child, and there were no living family members. And it seems like it would be appropriate
Yeah,
to do it.
absolutely.
If somehow a family member, some distant relative comes forward, then we would present that to them. But it sounds like a reasonable and right thing to do, so.
Where do we put it?
Yeah, we'll work for, hopefully provide a prominent place within the foyer of the town hall and make sure it's safe and, but well displayed.
That's a great idea.
Great idea, great work by Mike Purdy.
Okay, so, you have a motion to approve that?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion and second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Item 11 is to review and act on a one-day all alcohol license request of Joe Yosef, St. Mary's Syrian Orthodox Church, 1 Industrial Drive, for a wedding on Saturday, October 26th, from 7 p.m. to 12 a.m.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Next item, old business. We have, we may have a discussion about the issue of the nuisance dogs at 47 Memorial Drive in consideration of the March 12th, 2019 order of the Board of Selectmen. This was relative to complaints that some of the neighbors had sent into the board a couple of weeks ago. And we also have a response from the owner of the dogs, and that's where we are at the moment. Mr. Mizikar?
Yeah, so, I'll update the rest of the board that Chairman DiPaolo and I met with residents along with the Animal Control Officer, Keith Elms, about a week ago to discuss their ongoing concerns. We have reviewed the police logs, and I've had a conversation with the chief of police, and this continues to be hand-wrenching and as trying as it was when the board heard the original complaint, where the residents obviously have enough concern that they continue to contact the police department. They continue to bring the attention to staff and to board members directly. But we don't have a lot of field experience and witness through the police department of prolonged, ongoing barking. I've spoke with the chief of police. He feels from his review of the evidence, we haven't substantiated unreasonable barking at this time. We're bringing it to the board this evening to kind of, take more formal action. I can follow up with the homeowners with another letter reminding them of the obligations through the original order, which I do know from their letter they're well aware of. And I know they contend that there's other dogs barking in the neighborhood, so it's just frustrating for everyone who's involved. We're all trying to do the right thing, and in many ways, the owners of the dog have complied with the board's conditions of their orders, but the residents continue to experience prolonged barking periods. So there's no action to the board at this time, but I don't know if there's anything else Mr. DiPaolo wanted to present from that meeting or otherwise.
Well, it's frustrating because what we have documented through the animal control officer is not directly corresponding to what the neighbors say they're experiencing, and part of it is that they said they just didn't want to be a nuisance continually calling the police department, but so we don't have a documentation of the frequency and the history. And then, of course, the Springers saying that they don't believe that that's the case. But in any event, they actually did provide, I think I get this right, Val, there's actually a camera out that records the dogs that they own and actually records the sound. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe they have a home surveillance system that
Right.
they provided the animal control officer with.
And
login info.
they actually, the animal control officer can actually log into a live YouTube thing to see it. So if it happens, because he obviously can't be there all the time. So my recommendation is, unless the animal control officer had a different idea, is to continue to monitor this. And we'll have to deal with it if it doesn't seem to start to resolve itself shortly. But quite honestly, from our discussions with the animal control officer and the residents and the owner of the dogs, we don't have the same options we used to have dealing with nuisance dogs, et cetera. So they can't be banished. I mean, you can put orders on the owners. You could, actually, I didn't understand, but the animal control officer actually cannot write a ticket for a violation. They actually have to send a request into the court in Westboro, and they would have to issue it. So there is the issue of being able to find the animals, but it just seems like it's one of these things that's gonna be difficult to solve. So I think we should continue to monitor it, and hopefully the documentation will let us know what's going on. Correct. I don't know what else to do at this point. There's no
Sounds like
point.
a reasonable approach, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and I don't think having a formal dog hearing is gonna do anything, because I don't think we're gonna be able to resolve it, so.
There's nothing, if you read the law of what we can do around a nuisance dog, there's very little. I think we've done absolutely everything that we could possibly do. I feel terrible about the situation, because I can understand how frustrating it must be for both parties, the neighbors on Patriot Lane and the Springers. It's very difficult to know what to do to rectify a situation when there's conflicting reports of what's happening, as far as what the neighbors on Patriot Lane are reporting and what our animal control officer is hearing and seeing. I think the effort is being made to get out there, and I think the Springers are following and complying what we required. I don't know how you get a dog to stop barking. It's really tough. I just, there's just no clear path as to how to resolve it.
Not at the moment, so, all right, so we'll just have to monitor it. Okay. All right, we have a request for an executive session, but I request that we wait until we go through the correspondence. Okay, so item 14 is a letter dated September 24th from Kevin Mizikar to James O'Day and Rebecca Roush, co-chairs of the Joint Committee on Municipalities and Regional Government, regarding House Bill 1806, an act protecting municipalities from unfunded mandates. Obviously, Mr. Mizikar wrote a letter expressing his concern and support for this bill, although we're supposed to have protection from unfunded mandates, and over time it hasn't seemed to be, it's been sporadically effective, but I think we just have to make our concerns known, so duly noted. Item 15 is an email dated September 26th from Mary Jane Hardy, Mass Department of Revenue, notification of free cash approval of $8,631,981 in the Page to Throw Enterprise Fund of $29,805, so noted. Item 16 is a letter dated September 27th, 2019, Derek Grillo, Struck Catering, 130 Hamilton Street, Worcester, regarding notification of a 12C event on November 30th at 206 South Quinsigamon Ave, so noted. Item 17 is an email dated September 29th, 2019, from Benjamin Tartaglia, regarding concerns about, he lives at 19 Kenilworth Road, intersection of Lake and Edgewood, and we discussed that with Mr. Howland earlier. Item 18 is a letter dated September 30th from Gregory Giannanis? Gastonitis, sorry. Retirement, of the Retirement Board, notifying us that the Retirement Board election results have David Hodgeny, who just recently retired from the Fire Department, as a new member of the Retirement Board. Item 19 is an email dated September 30th, 2019, from Gregory Moran, Omni Environmental Group, 6 Lancaster County Road, Harvard, regarding a Phase 2 comprehensive site assessment for 905 Hartford Turnpike, so noted. Item 20 is an email dated October 1st, 2019, from Keith Elms, Animal Control Officer, regarding quality animal control report. Animal control officer, if you look at that, it's a lot busier
I
than I
read it.
thought.
It was very interesting. I couldn't believe the wildlife stuff.
I can't believe that they had 24 actions, 428 actions. That's busy. Item 21 is an email dated October 1st, 2019, from Derek Grillo, Struck Catering, 130 Hamilton Street, Worcester, regarding a 12C event at 206 South Quinsigamon Avenue on November 16th, 2019, so noted. Item 22 is a memo dated October 3rd from Bernard Cahill, Town Planner, regarding Town Center zoning, the process that Planning Department wants to take moving forward, to come forward with suggestions for a zoning for the Town Center, that probably an overlay district. I did ask that the BO Reuse Committee be specifically added as a key party, because what happens to Beal School and what happens to the Town Center are so intertwined. Anybody else have any comments on that? Okay, item 23 is an email dated October 3rd, 2019, from Kevin Mishlakar, regarding pay-as-you-throw fee analysis. It's a large document. I thought we needed a little bit of time to digest it, so I'm going to suggest that we have the manager review this with us at our October 22nd meeting, and we can decide what to do from there.
What's the timing on it, Mr. Chairman, this fiscal year, July 1?
It would,
That's the goal. The goal, if that change is gonna be made, the sooner we do it, after whatever due diligence we need is better, because the earlier we know in the budget process, the shift goes from, is between the fees and the tax rate impact, so, it's just, the sooner we know it, the less changes we make further in the budget process.
Great, I thought it was thorough and comprehensive. So what, our next meeting?
yeah.
Great.
Okay, item 24 is an email dated October 4th, 2019, from Jeremy Thompson, 495 Metro West Corridor Partnership in Westboro, regarding a reception to honor Paul Matthews, former executive director of the partnership. There'll be an event at State Line Brewing in Hopkinton on October 23rd, 5:30 to 8. Mr. Matthews has become the director of the Worcester, I think they call it the Worcester Research Bureau now. So he's did a good job. He was there quite a while, almost from the beginning, I think.
Yes.
Wasn't he?
Yes.
Item 25 is an email dated October 4th, 2019, from Michael Perner, Town Historian, regarding Town Historian update for September. He had a busy September. So noted. Item 26 is a letter dated October 4th, 2019, from Bernard Cahill, Town Planner, regarding the Planning Board's positive recommendation on Article 7 of the special town meeting. Item 27 and 28 are also from Mr. Cahill, regarding a positive vote on Article 8 and Article 9 from the Planning Board. So noted. Item 29 is an email dated October 4th, 2019, from Christine Mowry, Executive Director, Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, regarding the town clinician. This actually is the position, basically a job description of the master's level clinician, who would be brought on if the article at town meeting passes on the 21st, describing what the person would do. And item 30 is a letter dated October 5th, 2019, from Melinda Springus, 47 Memorial Drive, regarding their response to the nuisance dog complaint. So noted. Okay, that's all I have except for executive session. So could I have a motion? Move that the board vote to enter executive session pursuant to general laws, Chapter 30A, Section 6.
So moved.
Second.
Second, we have motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, we need a roll call vote. Mrs. Cassavant?
Aye.
Mr. Kane?
Aye.
Mr. Samia?
Aye.
Mr. Fowler, aye. Okay, the board will now convene into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law 30A, Section 21, subsection A6, to consider the purchase, exchange, or lease of value of real property for 100 to 220 Maple Ave, because an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the board. And furthermore, the board will not reconvene back into open session. So, this evening is adjourned. Good evening.